A horde of goblins savagely rush towards some warriors as a man expresses how this keeps happening day by day before some goblins corner him from behind and one of them runs forward to attack, but a man suddenly swoops in and slashes it mid-torso before menacingly approaching the another one and ripping its left hand off with his bare hands as the man behind him shakily asks just who he is. While someone's gaming, he expresses that he's liked games ever since he was young, which isn't a sin, or at the very least not that big of a sin. To be transported to this land with its caste system and poverty, betrayals and murders, and the biggest of them all, their countless monsters. His name is Dallin, but his real name is, as he's writing in a diary, a man approaches saying it's time to change shifts. Dallin confirms that nothing happened, to which the man replies that it was quiet since not a single goblin appeared, so Dallin asks if it's because he's patrolling the inner labyrinths now. The man replies that it's definitely getting colder outside, which is natural, since winter is coming, but he can't get used to it because of him belonging to the southern countryside. Dallin suddenly stands up as the man says he can see Palshan from here, so he tells him to have a good rest, hearing which the man says he did good work and bids him a good morning as Dallin jumps off the cart. He remarks that it's been 2 years since the tutorial. The starting point of this game is the bastion of humanity, the labyrinth city Palshan. It's on a completely different level than what it looked like from the screen and is a huge city where hundreds of thousands of people live, and is also the only path to safely go into the underground labyrinths because there's no other way that'll let people avoid the monsters coming from the labyrinth and gather countless treasures buried underneath. Other than that, based on the setup, exists a wish stone at the very bottom of the labyrinth which will grant any one wish and is probably the only way for him to get back to Earth. For checking whether or not it actually exists, he has to go down the labyrinth himself. A man cheerily approaches him who's the Galio's Emporium owner, Bolkma Galios, and tells him to not address him so formally since they're comrades who face danger together. When Dallin asks if he has anything to say to him, Bolkma says he wants him to join their Emporium as his personal mercenary, hearing which he suddenly becomes alarmed, thinking that he's never heard of this kind of event in the game before. Bolkma goes on and explains his merchant instincts are telling him that he'll soon stand toe-to-toe with the strongest superhumans in the kingdom and wants to hire him before then. Dallin thinks about it, but says he'll have to refuse the offer, hearing which Bolkma seems unperturbed and hands him his commission of 15 shillings, which is more than what he was initially offered, calling it an investment fee. After this, the two shake hands and bid goodbye. As Dallin walks through the city thinking of Bolkma's offer, and if the events of the game can change based on his actions, he says what he needs to do at once has already been predetermined and walks into an alley and enters a rowdy-looking bar where he finally finds what he's looking for as a notification pops up saying the corpse of the pathetic soldier has been discovered from which he can absorb the abilities. He triumphantly wonders what the greatest weapon will be to deal with this game and raises his hand over the corpse before announcing his skill. Corpse Collection, inwardly remarking that he'll see this game through to the end, no matter what. He says he liked difficult games, he liked controllability, commonly called physical, which is why he quickly got bored of easy games. But this one was tough even for him. The main character was weak and the monsters were strong while the world inside it was heading towards its ruin. But every NPC ally he had was either seduced by the demons or trying to betray and backstab him. Despite the fact that he died countless times, he was determined to see the game through to the end no matter what and pulled many all-nighters for it. As the screen asks him if he'd like to buy it, he frustratingly says he'll spend the money and why it needs him to buy the money before remarking that he'd have straight up deleted it if it wasn't for the amount of time and effort he'd invested into it. As Dallin sets down a drink, he says he should have just deleted it at the time and notices that other people can't see it, thinking about the Inheritor DLC, where players were allowed to inherit the skills of the players who had died in previous playthroughs, which opens up the possibility of endless growth, and the only flaw is that one has to personally visit the place and collect the soul in order to inherit its powers and receives the character to Haman's armored combat. As he's leaving, a drunken man steps forward, calling himself Maroon, the manager of the bar, and telling Dallin that he has to pay a transfer tax to safely eat and drink inside his bar without getting backstabbed, seeing which Dallin remembers that he's the guy who previously killed him and says he can't give him money since he doesn't have any. After an intense stare down, the man decides to let him go, saying that possible and that they just bothered a poor man without asking. He asks if he paid for the alcohol, and when Dallin says he did, agrees to make an exception but takes out his dagger just as Dallin turns the other way, saying goodbye, but he swiftly turns around saying he knew it and punches him outside the bar, breaking down the door and saying he won't fall for it twice. Enraged, the man calls all his lackeys outside who corner Dallin from every direction, but he grins and remarks that this is good timing since he just received a new skill and raises his hands, telling them to come at him. As a man rushes at him, he activates his new skill and a purple glow starts surrounding his fists before he punches him away and starts easily dealing with the others before someone tries to attack him with a wooden club which shatters upon impacting with Dalin's body, seeing which he distressingly asks why a human's body is as hard as steel before being punched away. Maroon angrily asks the lackeys if he didn't pay them at all and orders them to mess him up, but Dalin swiftly keeps beating up all that try to attack him and stops a dagger with his bare hands before punching its holder away as he annoyingly rubs his wrists and remarks that he was trying to go for the wrists, not the blade, and wonders if it's because the skill proficiency is low. He opens his status window and sees that it's only at 5% of its power, angrily remarking how hard it is as a man steps out of a door and asks what he's doing committing assault in broad daylight and if he thinks it's allowed just because he's a mercenary. Dalin angrily takes out his axe and throws it beside the man's face, stopping him mid-sentence as he was furiously explaining what happened if the guards found out about this. He steps forward while apologizing, saying his hand slipped, and takes out the axe from the wall before intimidatingly asking the terrified man what he was saying. Dalin remarks that you should know who your enemy is before threatening them, but he still managed to earn a lot since he was the inn owner, who will be able to stay at a nice inn with this. He goes to the Sword and Shield Inn, where the attendant asks him how long he intends to stay there, saying that they even offer discounts depending on what your mercenary rank, as to which he replies that he'll stay there for 1 week, and that he's a silver plate mercenary, so the attendant says breakfast and lunch will be free for him, although dinner will have to be separately purchased, and quotes the total price of 7 shillings, which Dalin drops on the counter, remarking that it's still expensive. In his room, he thinks that this is the real start. The most important thing before defeating this game is survival, for which he needs to get stronger and stop the world's ruin. And to do that, he needs money and EXP, since there's no way he'll be able to do that with his current skills and abilities. He needs money to get good equipment and needs to level up by using his ability, but thanks to his numerable plays, the corpses of his characters are spread throughout the continent, so he just needs to collect them to get much stronger than before. He needs to prepare himself as quickly as possible since time is tight, and decides to go meet the owner of the nest tomorrow for his special commission, which lets him earn money and collect corpses at the same time. The next morning, he decides to be off and goes to an old-looking house lit by a dim purple glow and sees that the owner isn't there despite the door being open before noticing something and wondering if he's an unwanted guest. He knocks the door in a specific rhythm hearing, which a girl walks out telling him about business hours before pausing and saying she hasn't seen him before after a quick banter. She invites him inside for tea as he puzzlingly notices the crossbow she was holding and introduces herself as Sienna once they sat down. He tells her his name and says he'd heard that he can accept commissions here, and after learning that he knows their ways, says she can offer him trivial missions for no, things that won't have as much of an impact on her business even if he fails, since she doesn't know or fully trust him for now. Dalin agrees to this, so she asks if she should test the abilities of the man who ripped a goblin to shreds with his bare hands. Later, Dalin angrily thinks about her "I don't know you yet" stuff and says she knew who he was from the moment he arrived in Paulsian. He arrives at the low streets, outskirts of the Bronze Territory, where his commission is a missing persons incident. There have been many missing persons cases happening in the last few months at the exact same spot, which is the entrance to the low street. They'd occur in 3- and 5-day periods, and most of the missing people are either women or children who are walking here alone. However, a young man was abducted here recently, making it so the offenses are slowly starting to become bolder and bolder. He arrives at the spot it was written to be and notices a deformed shadow rising up as a monster angrily walks towards him, saying it's hungry, seeing which Dalin alarmingly says that it's the one who ate him up as a screen appears in front of him, saying he's discovered the corpse of a hunter who was eaten by a test specimen before another one tells him a tip, saying that for corpses which have been eaten or absorbed by someone, he is able to inherit them by first defeating the target.